So we are now live streaming.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this session of the Waverley Local Planning Panel. The meeting will proceed on the basis that each of the matters will come up in the order that they're shown in the agenda for the meeting. Speakers will be called in order of the objectors first, followed by representatives of the applicant. Each person will be given 3 minutes to speak, and because of the circumstances under which we're operating, we are being very strict as far as we can be in relation to the 3-minute limit that is given to speakers, and there'll be a 30-second warning so that you're helped to bring it together in that last 30 seconds. You will remember, of course, that each of the people who have made written submissions each of those submissions have been read by members of the panel, and the members of the panel have generally visited most of the sites in the restricted manner that's suitable to the present circumstances. My name is Angus Talbot, and I'm the chair of the meeting. The panel consists of myself and 3 experts, or 2 experts and a community rep who also happens to be an expert. And I'll ask them to introduce themselves in a moment so that you understand the nature of the people that are involved. The panel, as you appreciate, is an independent panel established through the Department of Planning and is not in any way part of the council hierarchy, so that in that sense it's an independent panel comprised of experts suitable to the field. I started out in life as a solicitor. I then had a period of time as a barrister, practicing mainly in the Land and Environment Court, and ultimately I spent 15 years as a judge on the Land and Environment Court. Since then I've done various consulting work, including being on the panel at 2 other councils as chair, in addition to the Waverley panel. Now I'll ask each of our panel members, who you can probably see if you've got a screen, to introduce themselves, and the first person I'll ask is Alison Small.
Hi, my name's Alison Small. I'm the council representative, but I've also been an architect and a project manager for the past 30 years.
You're actually the community representative, I think.
Community representative, yes.
I hasten to add she is not a council representative.
Sorry, I meant community representative.
The most important, sorry, Alison. Mr. Harrison.
Hello, Michael Harrison. I'm a consultant urban designer and urban planner.
Thank you. And Mr. Peter Brennan.
Yeah, Peter Brennan, also a town planner with over 50 years experience. I'm a former director of planning at Waverley Council. I also sit on a number of other council planning panels. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now proceed to deal with the first matter, and that relates to a proposed development at 62 St James Road, Bondi Junction. I know I've been to the site and have an appreciation of the environs, even though, of course, naturally enough, I wasn't able to visit any of the particular properties concerned. The first person who I will ask to speak in accordance with my list is Mr. Craig Gibbons. Are you there, Mr. Gibbons?
Yes, I am, Mr. Talbot.
Yes, thank you very much. Your 3 minutes is starting now.
Oh, sorry, Mr. Chair, may I interrupt? I need to declare in the declaration of interest.
Yes, I'm sorry.
In respect to a matter.
Yes, thank you. Mr. Brennan's declared an interest in the matter number 8 and will be leaving the meeting at that time and will not participate in any part of the decision making in respect of that item.
Thank you.
And I omitted to ask whether you have any interest to declare, Mr. Harrison,
I have no interest to declare.
Ms. Small.
No interest to declare.
Yeah, thank you. I apologise, Mr. Brennan.
That's okay. Thank you.
Thank you for reminding me.
Thank you.
Now, Craig Gibbons, you're geared up again.
Yes.
Your time starts now. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity to address you on this matter. We're homeowners of 57 Ruthven Street, which is directly behind the development application in question. I have one key objection and two other areas of great concern that I'd like you to consider, please. The key objection is in regards to the new proposed building height and its setback at the rear towards our property. So the proposal increases the height of the building and it diminishes or reduces the distance of the building in respect to our property and puts it significantly closer to three rear neighbours, all of them on Ruthven Street, including us. And I'd like to say as well that formally through the council, I have permission to represent the owners of 55 Ruthven Street in this matter. So these matters pertain to them as much as it does to us.
Thank you.
The height
Noted.
is significantly, the height of the proposed second story, which doesn't exist now, is significantly above our rear fence and looking straight into our living areas, all of which have glass walling. It also looks into one of the bedrooms on the first floor of our property. This, coupled with the setback of the building at the rear, with balconies added by the plan to the first floor, and particularly of concern to the second floor, places that setback only 7 metres from our pool and from our outside entertaining area. And the height of the third floor, the very close proximity to our property and that of 55 Ruthven Street, will have a significant impact on the privacy that all of us value very highly. The second and third points relate to heritage and structural issues. The heritage information assessment ignores 57 Ruthven Street, which I think is an oversight on their part. Our building is one of the original buildings in this area, built in 1882 in the style of a terrace house. One of the motivations for living here was the heritage of the area and the fact that it is a family area, the visual enjoyment that we have for the suburb. Despite the heritage impact assessment and the vertical scale of the building, the applicant's own statement of effects, environmental effects, states that they have an intention to develop number 60 in the same way. So I would say this doubles the problem by their own admission. The third one in the remaining time is a structural issue. We have a large pool and a very large gum tree perched 7 metres above and directly adjacent to the area that's going to be excavated. And I see no structural plans for that in the development application.
Thank you for your assistance, Mr. Gibbons. I now call on Tim McKinnon. Are you there?
Yes, I am.
And are you ready to proceed?
Yes.
All right, your time starts now. Thank you.
Great. Look, we don't have, I'm at number 62, number 64, which is the next door and probably the most impacted property from the development. We don't have any issues about development generally in the area, providing it complies with all the planning guidelines. We just went through our own development over the last few years and at considerable expense was approved as a DA. And we've sort of, welcome any sensible development that maintains the heritage in the area. We haven't had an opportunity to discuss the development at all with the applicants, but would be happy to do so. But I would say that the major deficiency is it still doesn't seem to take into account, as a matter of process, the development that we've completed. The original DA ignored and looked at our site, which was as it existed before the DA. At that stage, the DA had been approved and building had commenced. It was now completed in July last year, and the second DA that they've put forward does not have any photos, any consideration of our approved development. And so it's deficient in a number of areas. There's a number of reports missing, which we've noted in our original, including things like asbestos, and there is asbestos on the side. There's no plans around that. Although I do note that I just went on to the DA's site, and there seems to be new documents there in February. We didn't know about those that were added subsequently. But so there's some process failures there. The big objections we have is, one, as Craig mentioned, is heritage. The heritage report, even the second heritage report, which I just had a chance to skim read because it was only put up in February after our submissions. The heritage report is deficient. It doesn't look, it pulls out examples in the street of other perhaps failures in maintaining heritage, but doesn't look at the fact that number 62, like number 60 and number 64 are all
30
very
seconds.
Similar cottages, and we've maintained the facade, and we think that the council should be consistent in doing so. The other big issues are overshadowing. It overshadows our living area and puts us in darkness all day, including number 66. It overshadows, and finally the height. You know, for a duplex, yeah, it just looks. There are not 3-story houses around here, and it impacts the heritage, and also
Time's
doesn't
up.
flow with height.
Thank you for your assistance, Mr. McKinnon. Those matters will be taken into account, of course, by the panel. Peter Prasad, are you there? Unmute your microphone.
Yes.
Thank you.
You.
This is your opportunity to support the application.
Right, I'm Peter Prasad. I'm the applicant, and I'm representing the owners, which is a young family that has recently got married, and they're expecting their baby in about 6 months' time.
Can I just interrupt you for a moment, just so that clarity, you won't lose time over this. There's also listed under the same Pyramid Consulting. Is that who you represent?
Yes.
And there's an Angela Kai and David Dix listed
Angela's,
as well.
yeah. And David.
I see, but you're making the presentation. Is that it, Mr. Prasad?
Yes, and they can speak if they wish to, but I will do the presentation. Yes.
All right. Yes. Thank you, Mr. Prasad. Thank you. I will go back to the objectors in a moment to ask if there are any questions from the panel. I overlooked doing that. Were there any questions for Mr. Gibbons or Mr. McKinnon while they're still there? Mr. Brennan?
Yeah, probably to both gentlemen, maybe Mr. Gibbons at first.
Sorry, Mr. Prasad. We'll get back to you in a minute.
Thank you.
Mr. McKinnon spoke about the addition that he's recently carried out to 64. Would an addition in that style, height, whatever, at the rear of the subject premises 62, have you got any views on how you'd feel about that, given that this other one's been recently constructed?
Yeah,
Oh, sorry, Craig.
Yeah, we
Yes,
do.
Mr. Gibbons first.
Yeah, it's Craig here. Yeah, we have views on that. We were engaged really closely in that DA and had no concerns with the DA. And since it's been built in accordance with exactly what they plan to do, we have no concerns with it. Fits in very well as far as we're concerned, has no impact on our amenity. The biggest concern we have is
that answers the question, I think, doesn't it?
Yep, it does.
Mr. McKinnon, do you want to add anything?
No, I just wanted to note one thing. I don't know if anyone from the council has an opportunity to look at our development.
I did from the park, so I could see you had sort of louvers and white louvers. Yep.
Well, you can actually probably see.
No,
sitting
they're
upstairs, you could see
exactly.
it anyway.
Yeah.
But yeah, look, I would have no objection to a development along the same lines as ours. I just would note one thing, that number 62 is a semi, so it's effectively 60 and 62 are the same as our cottage, but split in half. And I think the only consideration is the impact of that cottage having one side look lopsided. It's just that, but otherwise, if both sides did it in a similar way to we have, that is, you can't see from the street any addition, and you maintain the facade at the front and the dormer windows as we've done, we would have no objection.
All right, thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Harrison, did you have any questions for either of the objectors?
No, I don't have any.
Ms. Small?
No, I don't have any.
All right.
questions.
So we'll go back to Mr. Prasad. I'm sorry about that oversight, Mr. Prasad. It was a mistake on my part to call you before that had been dealt with. If you like to start again, your time starts now. Thank you.
Okay, good afternoon, gentlemen and ladies. My name is Peter Prasad. I represent the clients from Pyramid Consulting. This particular development, we had a look at it from putting the DA together. And yes, we did consider the impact on the surrounding buildings, which is part of the Mill Hill Conservation Area. And the objection in terms of the planner's report was about 300 over the height limit. There was some of the issues in terms of what we believe in terms of the general presentation of the development, and in considering what some of the neighbours and objectors had to say just now. Our concern is that we are complying in terms of the council requirements in terms of the height and the setbacks. Now, what the number of things we can do, what I propose to do is we've provided a revised plan to the council, and I'm not sure if the panel has had a look at it or no. And those revised plans have considered those amendments and changes that are in compliance, and I think will get us over the line in terms of concerns of the neighbours are and concerns of the council is. So first thing I want to ask the panel is to allow us to delay the decision of today's meeting, so that it gives us the time to resubmit those plans to the panel if they haven't fully assessed it, or the council. And these changes are including reducing the height of the building, a slight height, slightly about 300 mil, putting dormer windows.
Sorry, what was the first change?
The reducing the height of the building.
Oh, reducing height, yes.
The height, additional dormer window we had to put in the front, which gives you that look of the heritage look. The additional planting in the street, and the new windows gives us that 60s sort of look, which we've been all talking about. And the other minor issues are the basics was expired, so we can provide a new basics. We did provide the basics in the DA, but apparently it was more than 3 months. And there's other bits and pieces that the minor items that we can provide. So generally, in terms of what the objection from the council is, we are happy to incorporate that as an amended plan and resubmit it back to the panel and the council. And I think we can achieve the goals of what we're trying to do.
30 seconds.
I think the problem, Mr. Prasad, is that reviews have to be done within a time, and the time's up.
Well, they're minor changes, sir, and that's where I'm coming from, that we can provide this so that we can get it.
Well, I don't know whether we can defer it, but I'll take some advice about that.
And then including privacy screens, which is a concern of the neighbours at the back and on the side as well. So
it's a pity you didn't put all this in the first place.
Well, we requested a meeting with the council at the review time so that we can amend the plans and take this back into consideration.
All right. Anything you want to say? Thank you, Mr. Prasad. Anything you want to say, Mr. Harrison? Any questions?
Yes. The relationship to the heritage item to the rear is not indicated in the plans that I've seen with part of the agenda. And so it's rather difficult when I visited the site to understand that relationship. It does seem to me that your proposal is high compared to what the heritage item behind. So that relationship is really important to understand for me. Did you submit some information on that we haven't seen?
Report back with the review. There was an amended report was submitted, and I'm not sure if it's sort of been assessed fully in that respect. And the setback of the building, I think Mr. Gibbons mentioned that the building has been encroaching closer to his boundary at the rear. That setback hasn't changed. The building outline is exactly the same as what it is now. So we're not changing the setback of the rear boundary.
Well, afterwards, I'll check with the council officers if there's additional information we haven't seen.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Harrison. Ms. Smalley, you got any questions?
It's just also the other question was also at the front, how it's been projected out. It doesn't have a lot of detail of the other semi next to it, because they're all set back a certain amount, and this one's been pushed forward.
Yeah, well, we submitted an amended plan, and that was submitted, and we're happy. It's only a meter, I think, or so setback, and we're happy to sort of reconsider that and amend the plans for resubmission. And the front area is just a living area, a family room. I mean, in terms of spatial requirements, it's not going to take much in terms of changing the overall building. But yeah, I agree with you that it would probably be a better option in line with the building next door.
Mr. Brennan, you got anything further you want to put?
Well, obviously we're all on the same track here. The plans that I have don't have a site analysis where one certainly should have been submitted to show the relationship in plan of this building and the additions in relation to those adjoining buildings, and also composite front elevations and rear elevations to show the relationship. I think, the plans that I have certainly are deficient, and I can echo the comments made by Mr. Harrison, and that's something that I would expect any new submission or amended submission would include.
Sorry there, Mr. Brennan, we do have those plans. I'm going to put it up in here. That shows the site plan. I'm not sure if you got the same set of plans, but
Site analysis he asked for, which is something more than a plan.
Yeah, so well, I mean, we can provide additional analysis in terms of relation to the adjoining buildings. We've shown that on the sections and elevations.
Not really.
Well, no.
I don't think so.
Look at the section.
That's the front elevation, which only shows your front elevation. It doesn't show the adjoining properties, doesn't show relationships.
Yeah, it really needs. Yeah, it really needs a streetscape view of the semis on either side at least.
And a section through to the rear heritage item.
Right. Okay. So, yeah, we got the elevation shown that number 66 is much higher than 62, and number 64 we got that as well, and number 60. But in terms of pictorial 3D, we don't have that. But shown as a 2D plan.
Yeah, but normally people do a street view that is at 2D that shows the relationship of this property in the street.
Okay, we can provide that. That's I'm happy to provide that as part of the amended plans.
Anything further from the panel?
No, Mr. Chair, not from me.
All right. Sorry, nothing.
No, I think the problem is these drawings are more like construction drawings. They're not really DA style drawings which show a perspective, or that's what's missing. So we've discussed it already that needs to be resubmitted.
We're happy to provide the modeling for it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, the panel will reserve its decision. Thank you for your assistance, all of you. And the outcome of the deliberations by the panel will be published on the council's website. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Now, are we in a position to move to item number 2? There are 2 people listed to speak, Selena O'Connor and Michelle Orzaski. Are those people here?
Yes, Selena O'Connor, I'm here.
Thank you. And
yes, I'm Michelle.
you're the architect.
Correct. Yes.
All right. Thank you. This second matter relates to number 9 Tipper Avenue, Bronte, and the proposal is for alterations and additions to a single dwelling, including construction of a new studio and new swimming pool. And the first person I'll ask to address is Selena O'Connor. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you to you, and thank you for the panel members for the opportunity to put forward my concerns and my partner concerns. We've put in 2 submissions and also is supported by a submission by Simmons Goodyear, who's a town planner with over 30 years experience in this field.
And we've read them.
Points. Excellent. Thank you. Thank you for confirming. I've just got 6 points I want to cover off in my 3 minutes. Firstly, I just want to say that, look, I support the redevelopment of the home and the refurbishment of the studio. You know, people are entitled to do those works to their homes. I support the same volume of living space as being put forward in the DA, in the revised DA. What I don't support is the raising of the height of the studio to allow a storage room to be placed underneath it. So if the storage room that's intended for pool equipment was not to the same height that it currently is in the revised proposal, the building of the studio would not impact our view. We live in a very small apartment down the bottom of a block of units, and we've been fighting for some time to support the shared access to the view that is outside of our window looking over Bronte Bay. So that's my first point. The second point, I think, is the council needs to be consistent with previous decisions made on the studio. The council has previously said the height of the studio is what it is at the moment, and we would ask that the council considers the height that it currently is under the DA 136/2007 be maintained, and the council is consistent with this decision. In addition to consistency, I would also argue that the council complies with a notice that they put to the Fry's property to trim the trees to keep in keeping with the previous decision on the DA that I just mentioned. My third dot point is with regards to flow-on effects. If the roof line is raised, and you may well have seen this in the photos that attached to the first submission by Simmons Goodyear, the height of the trees in the neighbouring property will also raise because they require that additional height over the roof line to protect the privacy of their property. So if we raise if the applicant is successful in raising the roof line by 310 metres, I think it is, or up to 700, it will then, and it will then raise the trees. So in effect, the raising of the roof line will diminish the view and will diminish the value of our property. We'd also like to submit that the trees, that any DA conditions need to consider the trimming of the trees as part of it. And also, please, if you haven't inspected the property, we do very much welcome you to come to our property and see the view and the impact. It doesn't seem a lot to raise the roof line by 300 millimetres, but it is significant when you take it from the perspective of our home, and it is significant on the impact of our property value.
You've got one more point, have you?
It was really just to confirm the fact that we support the development, we just don't support the height of the roof line.
Yes, I think we believe that.
We believe that the amenity of the property can be achieved without reducing the value of our property.
All right, thank you for your assistance.
Thank you.
Architect Michelle Orzaski.
Thank you. It has been a good process with the planning team at council, and we have resubmitted 2 sets of amendments. As supported in the detailed planning report before you, the amendments provide for an appropriate planning outcome, not only to our client, but also to the neighbours. There is no contention raised with any of the prescribed conditions. The site is a heritage listed home, zoned R2. Unfortunately, it is hemmed in on all sides by 3 to 4 storey apartment blocks, inconsistent with the zone's planning objectives and extending well beyond our building line at the rear. Consequently, we have a larger than usual number of stakeholders to consider. The difficult site falls steeply from south to north and significantly from east to west. The existing house has little connection to usable outdoor space and little privacy. The existing roof, modest from the street, exceeds the LEP height due to the extreme fall of the land. The existing studio has little amenity. It is buried at the end of the garden with no connection or light. Our design resolves these issues by connecting living spaces to the new garden designed by William Dangar and providing a private balcony for owners to enjoy. Visual privacy will be improved between neighbours. We improved the south elevation visible from McPherson Street by setting back the first floor and returning the eve of the original heritage item. During the thorough process with the planning team, we have returned the northern side of the roof form to the original format to address view concerns of 3 of 11 Tipper Avenue. All proposed ridge heights to the house are now equal to the existing. We have lowered the studio by 300 millimetres, limited the floor to ceiling height to 2.4 metres and committed to the cost of a flat roof design to address the view sharing concerns of 5162 McPherson, which is Selina. In regard to the studio, and during my site analysis, I realised that the deeper the setback of the roof to the north of the studio from the northern boundary, the better the views to the neighbours to the south and southwest would be. And that also that views were ultimately limited by the recent construction of a house at 3 Tipper Avenue. It must be understood that the proposed massing of the studio has a positive impact on view sharing, as it has a much smaller footprint. It has an increased setback from the northeastern corner to the northern boundary of 5.5 metres from 2.9 metres. And it is only 40 centimetres higher than the existing and sits well below the existing fence height. During our discussions with council, we have said that we would happily modify and replace the trees of concern to Selina should we have a successful outcome on the studio. Any discussion around view sharing must acknowledge that the footprint and setback of the proposed studio impacts, not just the height. It would be unreasonable for our client to lose any further amenity when nothing can be gained due to the new construction at 3 Tipper Avenue.
Thank you.
Can I just make my concluding sentence? Or?
All right, concluding sentence. Thank
Through
you.
benchmark design on a highly constrained site, including a heritage listing, this proposal will contribute positively to the locals' character and maintain the site's relative heritage significance. The occupants' amenity will be improved while maintaining the amenity of the neighbours. The resultant built form is therefore consistent to the locality's desired future character as expressed by the relevant planning controls. I trust during the process we have undertaken and the spirit of cooperation the applicant has shown with council and stakeholders to date, the panel will determine this DA favourably without further modifications, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions to the speakers? Mr. Harrison?
No questions.
Ms. Small?
No questions. Thank you.
Mr. Brennan, any questions to the speakers?
No.
All right.
Could I
Thank
just
you.
ask for 10 more seconds, given the architect actually had significantly more time? It is not the
When did
case.
the architect get extra
You
time?
just allowed her another few more seconds to finish her concluding remarks. And sorry to bother you, but it really won't improve our amenity. So I just wanted to close with that final comment. It
All
was
right,
not correct
okay.
for her to say that.
I think we understand that submission.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Thank you for the time.
All right, good. Thank you for your assistance. The panel will reserve its decision and the outcome the ultimate outcome will be published on the council's website as soon as practicable. We now move on to item number 3, which relates to a proposed development at 119 McPherson Street, Bronte, which involves the demolition of existing garages and construction of new garages with 2-tier studio apartments above. And the only person registered to speak is David Fleeting. Are you there? Well, he didn't take the opportunity, so we'll move on to the next matter, keeping our decision until we've had an opportunity to just regather. In the circumstances, it's not good practice to do them on the spot, so we will reserve the decision in relation to matter number 3, and it will be published on the website, which takes us on to number 4. And number 4 relates to 8197 Birrell Street, Waverley. It relates to alterations in addition to one of the units, unit number 8. And the first person to speak is Mr. Nicholas Wong. And I see you're there, Mr. Wong. Are you ready to proceed? Unmute your microphone, Mr.
Yes,
Wong.
I am.
Oh, you are ready to proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Talbot.
Your time starts now.
So yes, I appreciate. Yep, thank you, Mr. Talbot, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak on behalf of my family's home, which is located 2 floors directly above the proposed alterations. Our primary concern with the proposal is in regards to demolition of the ground floor western external walls that directly connect up to the walls of our home. My family purchased our home in 2001 for its design and as-built condition, without the benefit of considering that a large portion of the western external walls that connect down to the ground floor could one day be demolished. And although we appreciate that the applicant's nominated engineer has deemed the walls to be non-load bearing, does that guarantee that there is zero chance for adverse impacts on the condition and integrity of the rest of the building? We note Patridge structural engineer's assessment on these alterations and quotes, when non-load bearing masonry walls are removed, there is still a risk that concrete beams or slabs may have previously deflected and come to inadvertently bear on the walls. The removal of the walls can then lead to a sudden increase in deflection of the concrete element, end quote. We refer to State Planning Policy number 65, Objective 2.3a, to improve the design quality of residential development by being a long-term asset to the neighbourhood. Does the demolition of the otherwise healthy walls promote this objective? The alterations clearly have the potential to inadvertently reduce the condition and design life cycle of the building, in particular to our home, which sits directly above the removal of walls. So the alterations promote the State Planning Objective 2.3d to maximise amenity, safety and security for occupants and the wider community. A construction certificate does not guarantee that there will be zero adverse impacts to the rest of the building, noting such examples as the Opal and Mascot Towers that would have also been granted structural and construction certificates. And unlike these examples, this is not a new construction. Our family has lived in this home for over 19 years, and we'd like to think that any variations to the common property would increase the longevity of the building rather than pose new risks onto it.
Thank you for that.
Yep. The proposed removal of walls open up a can of worms to ambiguity in root cause and accountability if issues are to become visible immediately after demolition or have a structural creeping effect that gradually becomes visible in the years to come. As a secondary concern, the proposed protrusions of colour-bond steel roofing to be installed do not demonstrate architectural compatibility with the existing building, nor do they promote the New South Wales State Planning Objective 2.3b to achieve better built form and aesthetics for the building as a whole. The proposed colour-bond material is not used anywhere else in the external finishes of the ground floor and would instead contrast with the existing white timber pergolas that characterise the entirety of ground floor units and the main entrance. These inconsistencies would be completely visible from our apartment, and the loss of this visual amenity would require contravention of sorry, could I just finish this one sentence?
Yes, finish the sentence, thank you.
Yep, would require the contravention of FSR standards bring the floor space ratio into a 26% exceedance. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wong. Dr. Caroline Mackley.
Yes, I'm here.
I just, where are you?
Oh, I don't have my video on because.
Oh, we're happy to take my audio.
Thank you.
So,
I have.
Your time starts now.
Thank you. Thank you to the panel. I refer to the prior speaker's concerns in relation to structure. Our building has suffered over time material cracking from creep. So I won't cover back over those particular points, but I also have concerns in relation to that, as with the visual amenity and the colour bond inconsistency. My main issue with this particular application is not just about Unit 8, but the approval of this application would set a precedent for 10 apartments, not one. The FSR has already exceeded, so to add not only for this Unit 8, but establish the ability for then 9 additional units to have the same application would materially affect not only FSR, but the entire amenity of the whole block. One of the great things about this block is the fact that there is gardens at the ground level that most of us enjoy, even though we sit above them. And I feel that the consistency with and the precedent impacts during construction of not one but potentially 10, and I think that's one of the key issues that I'd like the council to consider, is the fact that it opens the ability for 9 other apartments to do the same thing, 9 inconvenience through construction and demolition. And then I guess the final point that I'd also like to make is that 75% of the occupants of this building have voted against this proposal on multiple occasions. And I feel that that demonstrates the community's lack of approval or acceptance of the extent to which these alterations are being proposed. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor. Any questions for the speakers? Mr. Harrison?
No, but we will be asking council officers afterwards a couple of these issues.
Yes, Ms. Small.
Is there a section just shows the car park below? So where it's is it, probably want to hear from the architect, but is it possibly the concrete slab that it's been extended on? So it's probably transfer slab when they're worried about the structure. That's probably, I just want to hear from the architect.
Yes, all right, well, we'll get to that.
Yeah.
Mr. Brennan, do you have any question for the speakers?
Not of the speakers, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
No, thank you. Thank you for your assistance. We now move to the architect, Mr. Peter Cracknell. Are you there?
He's muted.
He doesn't appear on the screen either.
Yeah, no, he's there, but you can't hear him.
I'm unmuted.
But the architect that's listed is Peter Cracknell. You're shown as Peter Lonigan.
Yeah, I am Peter Lonigan. So the architectural firm is Cracknell and Lonigan Architects.
I see.
Julie Cracknell, and I'm Peter Lonigan. So I'm sorry.
Is Cracknell not here?
Cracknell's, yes, she's here, but she's not speaking. But Michael Harrison can probably vouch for me, I think.
Yeah, I can vouch for him.
Peter,
well, I'm not concerned about panel members vouching for people. Mr. Lonigan, you wish to make Mr. Lonigan, you wish to make the address. Is that the position?
Well, no, Mr. Talbot. Really, I was just making myself available to answer questions if there are any questions. But I could just deal with the issues that were raised by the two objectors.
Yes. And well, that's your job. So go. Yeah. Well, give you 3 minutes, starting now.
Okay. Thanks very much. So the extension sits on top of the edge of the existing car park wall. So currently the building steps in from the perimeter of the car park. So we're in fact extending the car park structure one level above the ground level. There's no roofs on the ground floor as commented, but that's because the ground floor is covered by the 3 other floors of the building. And I'd like to say that the 75% of people who voted against the application was in the form of proxy votes that were held contrary to the Stratas Act and the voting procedures under the new Strata Act. So
I don't think you need to dwell on that point.
Okay.
Move on to the merits.
So the FSR is reported as being 25% or 26% over the permissible FSR. It's probably worth saying that the building, the existing building, is in excess of 3,000 square metres of residential apartments, and this application proposes only 34 square metres. So it's a probably unfair characterisation to say that this addition exceeds the floor space ratio by 26%. It causes an exceedance of 26%, but at the time that the building was approved, there was a higher FSR permissible on the site. So there's a whole range of factors that go together to make up that 26% and that perceived non-compliance. But the council report, I think, deals with these issues very well and very fairly. And the main purpose of the application is that this is a family of 5, 3 teenage children and 2 parents. It has a on-plan footprint of over 400 square metres.
30 seconds.
And our extension seeks approval to extend the interior of this lot from 135 square metres by 35 square metres. So it just adds an additional bedroom for the 3 children and increases the living space and the amenity of the apartment greatly.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Lonergan. Are there any questions, Mr. Brennan?
I have no questions. Thank you, Mr.
Alison Small?
Oh, I was just going to say, really to alleviate the questions that some of the people were bringing up, is perhaps you've explained that really with the structure, you're actually putting the structure on top of the structure of the car park. Is that's all the way around?
Well, it's only on one wall. Only on the west.
No, but where you've extended the master bedroom there, what happens on that wall, the northern wall?
Yes, it's entirely on the car park wall.
All right, so it's basically the structure's coming down on the load into the car park. So that's perfectly logical and normal construction.
Yes, I hope so.
Mr. Harrison?
On that structural question, I understood they were concerned about some demolition of external wall.
Well, in the process, the building's a concrete frame building, and we're proposing to knock out the panels on the existing bedrooms and extend those panels out to the perimeter of the car park. So there would need to be some re-support of the non-load bearing walls that are above this, above level 1, above the ground level apartment. But you know, we got structural advice a couple of years ago and continued to provide more and more structural advice through the process. And it is perfectly doable what's being proposed, and might I say, pretty pretty standard construction in this, the scope of building and technology. I mean, if we're talking about the Opal building and the building out in Botany, they were new buildings. This is a building that's been standing for nearly 30 years, and certainly, or 20 years, and certainly it wouldn't suffer the same issues that those two buildings that were cited suffered.
And one other question.
Yes, Mr. Harrison.
There was I'll be asking the question of council officers later about that issue of precedent, what you're doing for this apartment, whether that could be done to 9 other apartments. Do you have any comment about that?
Yes, well, so the ground floor apartments all have common property attachments on the outside. This apartment is unique in that the whole of the outside of the lot is on title. It's not. It's on plan. It's not common property, which is unusual and quite unique in a residential flat building. But also, this building, this apartment is in a portion of the building where, so it's in the southwestern corner of the building, where it's not passed by any other occupants. So all of the other apartments, there's pathways and access to the street and access to the entry, and those smaller contained courtyards are quite different to this courtyard, which is basically the outdoor space in this apartment is basically sort of leftover space after the building of the building. The other apartments on the ground floor have contained courtyard apartments that are built in and away from the site boundaries. So
the answer to the question, in short, is you don't think it's likely.
It's entirely unlikely, Mr. Talbot, because it's not the same, and therefore a precedent couldn't be claimed.
All right.
Mr. Talbot, I'm not sure that's correct. I think that the courtyards, my understanding of the strata plan is that those courtyards are all on title and therefore enable all of those owners of those ground floor apartments to potentially go through the same process. I think that's a point that needs to be confirmed.
No,
we'll check that.
We might need to check that. Let's not get in. I don't want to get into a slanging match. I see that it's contested, and we'll take steps to ascertain whether the statement's correct or otherwise, and make our decision based upon that inquiry. I think I interrupted you, Ms. Small, from raising another point, did I?
No. I think he answered my question.
All right, Mr. Brennan, you're right.
I'm right. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You're right. Thank you, Mr. Lonergan. The panel will defer its decision and have given the opportunity to retire and consider what's been put. And the decision, as I've said before, will appear on the website.
Oh, and but just by the way, the owners are available if the panel has any questions for Carly and Nikki Belair, who are on the screen. And
well, they're not registered to speak, so we can't deal with them. But thank you for that, Honour.
Okay, thank you.
Item number 5 has already been dealt with, Lamrock Street in Bondi Beach, the boarding house. For those of you who weren't aware, earlier in the day, the public meeting was held earlier to deal with the number of interests that there were in that property, and the people have been heard. So that is why we're now moving on to item number 6. And in relation to that, there are no objectors listed to speak. There was only one written objection, and the applicant is represented by the architect Nicholas Solomon, presumably not to talk us out of what the decision might be, but rather to answer questions. Is that the position, Mr. Solomon?
Yes, can everyone hear me?
Yes, everyone can hear you.
Yes, I'm the architect and applicant. I'm purely here to compliment Alana Jelfs and Angela Rossi for the process and to answer any questions that you may have.
Mr. Brennan?
No. No questions.
Ms. Small?
Mr. Chair?
No questions, quite clearly agree with what, just clearly illustrated, no questions.
Thank you, Mr. Harrison.
No questions.
All right, well, thank you for making yourself available, Mr. Solomon. And nevertheless, the council will, the panel will adjourn for the purposes of considering what its decision should be.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Talbot. Thank you. Goodbye.
Right. We're moving on to item number 7, which means it will just be a changeover of files. Now, item number 7 relates to the property 11 Hardy Street, North Bondi. It's a modification application pursuant to section 4.552 for some additional excavation, enclosure of an attic, a balcony, pool changes, and some other alterations, all of which are set out in the proposal and in the reports provided by council. The only person registered to speak is Anthony Weinberg, the applicant. Are you there, Mr. Weinberg?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
You better unmute your microphone.
Can you hear me now? Is that
yes,
better?
Yes, can now. Thank you. Great. Mr. Weinberg, you're just here to answer questions, I take it?
Yeah, that's correct. I'm just like to thank the panel for considering the section 4.55 and address any questions that they might have.
Are there any questions from you, Mr. Harrison?
No, no questions.
Ms. Small?
No questions.
And Mr. Brennan?
Yeah, no questions, Mr. Chair.
All right. Well, Mr. Weinberg, you can make what you like out of that. The panel, nevertheless, will adjourn. The decision will be published on the website in due course. Thank you for attending to assist us.
Thank you, Mr. Talbot, and to the panel.
People from item 7 can now go if they wish, or mute. Moving on to item number 8. Mr. Brennan, I ask you to leave the meeting.
I will, Mr. Chair, and I'll log back in at 2 o'clock.
Or you can mute your microphone and disappear from view.
Yeah, I'll do that.
And you've got to come back at 2. That's right. No, you go altogether. Is that? And come back at 2 o'clock. You're quite right. Mr. Brennan declared an interest in this property, having considered it in earlier phases of its development. So the application relates to the property at 2/79 Ocean View Avenue, Dover Heights. Alterations in addition to the attached dual occupancy unit number 2. There are no people listed to speak. I've inspected the site. The only change to what has been proposed, as I understand it from the council officers, relates to a pergola on the proposed terrace. The panel members remaining happy for this to be determined now, or do you want to?
Excuse me, Mr. Talbot, I don't know if you can hear me. My name's David Epstein, but I am registered to speak. I'm the architect and here on behalf of the applicant.
Oh yes, you're in the latest list. That's right. You must have registered only this morning. Yes, all right.
Oh, yesterday, but maybe they added me this morning.
It's all right. I was looking at the formal list. You're quite correct, Mr. Epstein. You are registered to speak, and I invite you to do so.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Look, the only reason that I wanted to address the panel is in relation to condition number 2, which is to not approve the works to the lower ground floor rear terrace.
That's the pergola. Is that the pergola?
Yeah. Now, my understanding from the officer's report is that there is the reason for refusal of that part of the development is its impact on the neighbouring building, the views from the balconies in that building. If you look at the report, there are some photographs in there that might help you to understand on page figure 2 in the report.
Which is on, what page is that on?
So it's page 434 in the report.
Yeah, it's in the early part.
Yeah. So that, I guess, best shows the terrace in question. That terrace is the private terrace belonging to Unit 2, 79 Ocean View Avenue. It is their only private open space, and it is immediately adjacent to their living area. And the proposal to put a pergola there and some screening is purely to provide them with privacy and some shading, which I don't think is an unreasonable proposition. Now, I've actually been into that a unit that is behind the development to the west. You can see it in that photograph, figure 2 as well. And I've also shown in my drawings some sections to illustrate the sight lines from that unit. And I would argue that the impact from that unit is negligible in that they don't currently see the park on the western side, on the eastern side of the subject development of number 79, which is the reserve. They do have views of the ocean, and I don't believe that the pergola or the screens will obstruct their views of the ocean. And I've seen that and taken photographs of that, and I provided that to the officer, but for some reason that wasn't included in her report. So in the interest of trying to, I think you can see from that photograph in the report, of trying to provide some level of privacy to that open space, and to ensuring that this apartment actually has some outdoor space that can be used. It is their only open space. I don't think that the report is fair in its assessment of the view impact. So in addition, the units above the one on the lower level in that apartment to the west clearly look straight over the top of the building, and they're not affected at all. So it's only the one, the one apartment that may be in question, but I believe that the impact is negligible.
I see. Right. Well, we'll discuss that with the officer.
Okay.
You got any questions, Mr. Harrison?
Well, it is rather important to understand that view impact, and
yes,
I don't. Maybe I'm missing something, but I can't see a photograph from that balcony to try and work out what the impact is.
There's a photograph towards the balcony.
They're not in the report. I can show you from here. I took photographs and I actually gave those to the officer, but unfortunately, as I said,
we'll ask for them later, and we'll be able to see them then.
But yeah, so these are the photographs anyway. I did take them with views, and I actually tried to superimpose the structure in the photographs too, so you could actually clearly see what the impact is. And I would appreciate if you could look at those. And either our hope is that that condition would be deleted, or alternatively amended, perhaps if we provided a bit further setbacks. The pergola only covers half the terrace; it doesn't cover the whole terrace. And perhaps we could set it back a bit further to further reduce any impact that the panel feels there might be.
Well, how far would that be?
Sorry, to increase the setback?
Yes.
Well, it only covers half the terrace, as I said. So perhaps on the southern side, we could bring it back a little bit further. But we couldn't really reduce it much more.
How does the southern side help?
Well, it wouldn't help much, to be honest. I think it would only just shrink down the size of the structure a little bit more if it's felt necessary. But I don't think that it's going to make any significant difference, because I don't think that the current structure really has much of an impact.
So you're not really offering to set back at all, well, in any relevant sense?
Well, I think that I can't see any other way of doing it. The other alternative might be to have an awning that simply comes off the existing concrete structure, the roof of that development of the of Unit 2, and with no screening, but then it sort of would add bulk, I think, to the park. We've set it back so we also don't affect the park. So I think what we've proposed is a fairly is a good solution, and it's one that accommodates everybody. It also, by the way, provides privacy to those apartments, because we no longer stand on the terrace and look directly into their apartments. So I think it's probably the best solution that could be found in this instance.
Well, we'll try and get access to those other photographs. Ms. Small, have you got anything further about that, Mr. Harrison?
No, I think we'll be able to work it out.
I think once I see the photos and see the implications, that will help a lot.
Yes, all right. Well, in that case, Mr. Epstein, there's nothing further that we require from you, so you're excused.
Okay, thank you.
The panel will now adjourn to consider the submission that you put and the other matters that were raised, and the determination by the panel will appear on the council's website.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Epstein. You can leave.
Thank you.
And the panel will now retire. The public meeting is closed, and the panel will go into private session at 2 p.m. Redial in at 2 o'clock.